Anyway, welcome. I'm Wendy Chamberlain. I'm president of the Middle East Institute, and I am just so happy that you've been able to join us in uh, enabling MEI to show off some of our prized assets. One of them was the garden, this gem of a garden right in the middle of DuPont Circle. I think we have the only 17th century Damascus fountain in town.
That's a safe bet.
Yeah, prove me wrong. But then, because it's kind of cold and damp, we've moved into our library, which is our second. We're very proud of this library. It's just recently been reconstructed with the help of the Sultanate of Oman. But we have a third asset, and that is our chairman, who will be speaking to you in a minute. And I'd like to, but before I introduce him, I'd like to thank Good Harbor Consulting for providing the wine, which I don't have to ask you. I know you've all enjoyed in the last half hour. Dick Clarke is our chairman, and we are very proud. Dick has had a multifaceted career in government. He served in defense at the State Department, where I met him, at the White House under 3 presidents, both Republican and Democrat. Since retiring from government, he has started his own consulting firm in cybersecurity. He is a frequent commentator on ABC News. He has taught at Harvard. He has just been appointed by Governor Terry McAuliffe as co-chairman of the Cybersecurity Commission here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. He's restless. He's energetic. Who knows what he'll do next? He's truly a Renaissance man. No, he is. I'm sorry. I know I'm going to pay for this, but I do like to brag about him, and he won't let me brag about him to his face. But he writes books, and now he's really going to get embarrassed because I'm going to point out that 2 of his nonfiction books, Against All Enemies, changed the way America and frankly the world thought about the counterterrorism campaign, which it became an international bestseller. I saw it in every airport I ever went to around the world. And his second nonfiction book that he's written was in a completely different genre, completely different subject, also an international bestseller, and that was on cyber wars. And I understand that the U.S. Army Cyber Command has made that mandatory reading for anybody involved in cyber wars, is to read his textbook now on cyber wars. Well, I think he's about to do it again in yet a third genre, and that is fiction, a novel. Dick will talk to you tonight about his newest novel. This is his third novel, I think, on drones, the defensive use of drones. It's a novel, but let me assure you, it's a page-turner, but let me assure you, you're going to read it like a textbook. When I read an earlier version of it, but I tell you, he's called it Sting of the Drone, which I think is cute, but you could have renamed it Consequences, because, and I encourage you to read the book, but if you read the book, you will learn so much about the drone program and the consequences of the drone program, the consequences of introducing a new weapon system in an already proliferate world arena, the consequences and the impact on political leaders who have to target and have to make the decisions and have to develop the procedures for use of this new weapon system, the tragedy of mishaps when things go wrong, and finally the consequences to the people who live with the moral dilemma of the drone program. Read it and learn, read it and weep, read it and enjoy yourself. But please do enjoy, as I do every time I talk to him, our chairman, Richard Clarke.
That was what Wendy promised would be a short introduction. So
I left out a lot.
yeah, so you can only imagine what a long introduction would have been like. Thank you all for coming. And thank you for coming not only to this book event, but to the Middle East Institute. We wanted to hold this event here to kind of show off the place. We're very proud of the library and do wander around upstairs. afterward. Don't bring your drinks upstairs, but do wander around upstairs. We have some very rare stuff up there. So I'm going to be killed, right, if anybody goes upstairs with a drink. But we do think this is a marvelous institution. We're, with the board, in the process of trying to expand it and make it a little campus. We have 4 buildings here now, and we're going to try to get it up to 5 shortly and create a bigger space for all of MEI's activities. And there are so many MEI activities. Please look on our web page, because there's constantly really interesting and great events. Tuesday night, as Wendy said, in this space, combination cultural event and event to focus attention on the plight of Syrian refugees. Very powerful, very powerful. But let me talk briefly about the book, because that's the alleged purpose of the evening. It is a novel, and I keep, in all of the TV interviews I do, being asked the first question is that, why did you write a novel about this issue and not do another nonfiction book? And the answer is kind of straightforward. No one reads nonfiction books. I was lucky with my first one, and a lot of people read that. But you know, outside of the Beltway, where everybody is a policy wonk, and I include all of you in that because you're here. By definition, you're policy wonk. But outside of the Beltway, you know, no one is going to pick up a book that says the pros and cons of drone warfare, or inside drone warfare. It's just not going to get very far. But I think if you can pull off writing a Tom Clancy-like book, and I'll leave it to you whether or not I succeeded in that. That was certainly the goal. Then, you know, people may enjoy it and pass it on, word of mouth and whatnot, and get a larger audience of people reading it. The other question I've been getting, and Jake Tapper asked me the other day on CNN, is, you know, Jake said, I've known Jake for a long time, he said, you know, I read your book, now I don't know whether you're for drones or against it. I said, good, then the book worked. Because I don't want you knowing or thinking that this is a polemic either for or against drones. And while there are not a lot of soliloquies in the book, since no one wants to read that, except if they're from Shakespeare, there are moments when characters in the book explain their views about drones. An Air Force pilot, a woman from the CIA, a person whose brother just got killed by a drone in Yemen, in Rawa. I keep being disturbed by what's happening in the world because of drones, because everything I wrote in the book is now happening. There's a scene in Rawa in Yemen where there's an accidental drone attack and innocent people get killed, and then that happened. There's a scene in the book where a man falls in front of the MBTA train, the Harvard line in Boston, in the Park Street station in Boston. And then I picked up the paper the other day, and that had just happened. So I may just stop writing because. But the second chapter is the one we've put online for everybody to read without buying the book. And we wanted to do that because it's a meeting of what in the novel we call the Kill Committee. And people have asked, you know, that's a little bit much. There is no such thing, is there? Well, unfortunately, the answer is there is. And while they don't call it the Kill Committee, and in the novel the National Security Advisor says pointedly, don't call it the Kill Committee, there is. And U.S. government officials do actually have to sit around and look at folders, like in Chapter 2, with pictures and names and descriptions. And you know, it could be the admissions committee for a college, or the promotion committee in the Foreign Service, but it's actually a group of American government officials from many departments, state, justice, CIA, defense, homeland security, sitting around in the White House deciding on who to kill. And I think if we could have seen that 10 years ago, if we could have somehow sat in the Situation Room 10 years ago and opened a picture into the future 10 years later and watched a kill committee meeting in that same room, then I don't think we would have gone down this road. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure, actually, that we would not have. Because we did sit in the Situation Room 10 years ago and ask, how are we going to get these terrorist leaders who are beyond our reach? How are we going to get Osama bin Laden, who the CIA had fecklessly tried to get for 3 or 4 years? And if we don't get them, are they going to get us first? And that was the debate. And we asked the question, if it's all right to attack terrorist camps with cruise missiles, where scores of people will be killed, and there's almost a guarantee of collateral damage, then why is it wrong to use a much more discreet and targeted weapon with a much smaller warhead, where you can stand above the target for hours on end and be sure that there's no collateral going to happen, or at least reduce the probability of it. And the decision was made, finally, on September 12th, 2001, that we would start this program to go after the leadership of Al-Qaeda. And about 2 months later, I think it was November 14th, 2001, Mohammed Atef, who was the leader of the military wing of Al-Qaeda, was found by a Predator drone and killed. And he was the first person killed by an American drone. We are now up to 2,500. We have killed people not only in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but in Libya, in Yemen, and in Somalia. I'm told 2,500 is a minimum estimate. It could be many more. There's a very wide debate and huge differences in the numbers about how many innocent people, or in the jargon, collateral, have been killed. We don't know. What we do know is that this idea of a tool to get a handful of senior terrorist leaders became something that both the Bush administration and then the Obama administration used a great deal. And as much as I love our president, you have to say that in the Obama administration, they did it a lot more. They really ramped it up. And with some good effect, because a lot of the leaders of Al-Qaeda were taken out of action, destroyed. But with some bad effect, because the tool, the weapon, became a controversy in and of itself. In Somalia, in Yemen, in Pakistan. When there are demonstrations in the streets in Karachi, or Mogadishu, or Aden, or Sana'a, not about the United States, not about counterterrorism, but about the drone program. That may be a sign that we have overused it. I understand the temptation. I understand the seduction of the drone program. When you're a senior counterterrorism official of the United States government and you think it is your personal job to stop the attacks, and it is your personal job to make sure that embassy in Sana'a doesn't blow up, and you know people are trying to blow it up, when you think that there are people trying to come here and blow us up, it's a very personal mission that you have to do whatever you can to save American lives. And when the only thing you have that is working, when the only thing you have that can get the terrorists before they get us is the drone program, well, then you keep using it. And like crack or anything else, it becomes an addiction. And you become dependent upon it. And I personally think that's what's happened. I'm glad to see the president has reduced the program significantly, but it's still making mistakes. And long after he changed the rules and made it a smaller program, we attacked and destroyed a wedding party in Yemen, which is inexplicable to me how we could have made that mistake, especially under the new rules, but we did. So all of those issues are tied up in the novel. I hope it is a novel that nonetheless reads as Wendy said, a page turner. I hope it's a page turner. And yeah, you're prejudiced. And I hope it does stimulate some debate, and I hope it gets to readers who wouldn't otherwise read about drones or think about drones. We're all going to have to think about drones a lot in the future. They may not be delivering your Amazon books, despite what you saw on TV, anytime soon. But they will be, and they are today, doing Coast Guard search and air rescue. They will be, and they are today, patrolling the American-Mexican border looking for illegal immigrants. They are flying in the hands of private American farmers looking at crop yields. They are flying, as we saw recently over Washington, looking at real estate. It is now a great real estate tool. Drones are coming to a neighborhood near you, and there are some severe questions that need to be asked, like what happens if they bump into an airplane, as one almost did in Florida last month? What happens if it hovers over your hot tub when you wish that no one was looking? Because in most places there appears to be no law that prevents the neighbor from flying a drone over your house. So there are lots of issues, and we have only begun the era of the drone. There's a little dialogue in the beginning of the book about whether or not to call them drones. And that dialogue is a reconstruction of a dialogue I had with a friend at the Pentagon, who shall be nameless because I don't see him here. And he said, don't call them drones. You can't call them drones anymore. I said, oh, they're UAVs. And, no, you can't call them UAVs. Well, I said, but that's what you guys call them. No. We call them RPVs. What happened to UAV? What happened to drone? Well, you see, RPV is remotely piloted vehicle, and that conveys the message that they are piloted. And that's the message that we want to convey. These are not robots. They are, my Pentagon friend said, they are remotely piloted vehicles. And I reminded him of what my other friend, Bill Maher, calls them, which is flying killer robots. And in the novel, as you will see, there's some discussion of whether or not to turn that into an acronym. So I will end there and be glad to take your questions as we go through the evening and sign books and have some wine.
Okay, we'll take a few questions, but we do want to leave time for Dick to sign books and for you to buy them, because I think you'll all want to read it. We have a microphone, and I only ask that you speak into the microphone because we're recording this. We like to upload all of our events at MEI on our website, which is enormously effective. We had over 1 million hits on our website last year, most of them in the Middle East. So anyway, questions? I see first hand that went up, lady in the back.
Thank you so much for coming, Mr. Clarke. I have a question. As a student of international security and foreign policy, I was just wondering, do you see in the near future, especially with the next White House administration, a continuation of the drone program, or what are other alternatives for foreign policy options?
It's a good question. I think when the president announced the new drone policy last May, and his speech at the National Defense University, one of the things he said explicitly at the time was, I'm coming up with this new set of rules about drones, and he actually used the word drones. He said, because I am afraid that if there aren't rules about drones, that future administrations will use them without due regard for the problems that can happen. And so he promulgated some rules, which are still classified, I think, but the broad brush of what they are is publicly available. I think any president is going to use them. The question is how often, and under what rules and what transparency. You know, speaking of West Point this week, the president again mentioned drones and said one of the problems with the use of drones was the lack of transparency. And I think that's right. You know, when you get the wedding in Yemen, and we never know if anyone's punished for that. We never know who made the mistake, why they make the mistake, how have we corrected the procedures so that mistake won't occur again. Are we willing to admit that we did it and pay reparations, which are acceptable in Islamic tradition in Yemen? You know, that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen anywhere. We've never paid any reparations for any mistakes that we've made by drones because it's a covert program. Well, how can you say on the one hand it's a covert program, on the other hand have the president keep talking about it? I mean, there's a slight problem there.
I couldn't thank you more for that segue into my question. I'm just out of Yemen, and one of the things that we notice most is that whatever the problems may be in the use of drones, the greatest problem we face there is that there is no clarity on why it's being done.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that moving it from a covert program to one that we can more openly discuss in terms of this is what we're trying to accomplish and this is why we're doing this as opposed to something else would address some of the problems?
I think it would begin to. And in countries like Yemen, where the Yemen government is actually asking us to do it, and we're actually refusing to do it sometimes when they want us to do it, because the attacks they want us to do don't always meet the president's new criteria. And the same in Pakistan. You know, the Pakistani government asking us to conduct drone strikes and then criticizing us when we do. So I think the notion that it's a covert program has only gotten us in trouble. And if the president wants to make good his suggestion about transparency on the drone program, end the covert program.
Mr. Glass.
Thank you. Not a question, Wendy or Richard. I'm Wayne Glass, professor from the School of International Relations at the University of Southern California. I just want to say thank you so much. A number of my students are here from the School of International Relations from California. It's a real pleasure and exciting for them to be here and hear what you have to say. Richard, an old friend of mine from State Department days quite a long time ago. So thanks for including us, and we're very interested, and we're going to buy some books.
Well, more importantly, if your students are here for the first time, come back and use the library. It's available for students.
To sort of follow up on the previous comment about the problem with transparency, do you think, I'm trying not to say too much about what's in the book, having finished it. You bring out one of the other issues around it being hidden, which is the costs on the pilots.
Mm-hmm.
The costs of what it does to you to be invisible in half a world away and making these grave decisions. And one of the big problems with modern warfare is the impact that it has on our guys, the ones who survive, the ones who walk away with PTSD and so forth. Is there something to be said there for getting the transparency out, A, for them, and maybe the fact that you make it transparent for them and for us and for our hearts, making it transparent for the rest of the world?
Well, there is a real, and this is an issue in the novel, there is a real stress on the pilots. Now, I know it doesn't compare at all. Those of you who have been in combat, it doesn't compare to actually being in combat. But there is a stress on the pilots. And when we first did the program, the unarmed program, I remember being up at 2 and 3 in the morning, staring at a television set, and being totally amazed that I was looking at a live shot of a place outside of Kandahar. I knew the technology, I understood the technology, but to see it and to say to the pilot, I want to go over there and take a look at that, and and there you were, and it was live. I knew we had crossed the threshold, but the pilots do have problems because of the fact it looks so much like a video game, and they have to keep telling themselves it's not. It really does look like a video game. And they're in these darkened, air-conditioned rooms, and in the novel at Creech Air Force Base outside of Vegas, and that's in fact where many of them are. They'll fly an 8-hour mission or a 12-hour mission, and nothing will happen, or it'll all be reconnaissance. But someday they will kill somebody. And then they will walk out, as happens in the novel, and get in their convertible and drive down to the Strip in Las Vegas and pound a few back because it's so incongruous. It's hard for anybody to deal with. And in the book and in reality, the Air Force has put chaplains and psychiatrists in the unit to help them try to deal with the incongruity of this modern kind of warfare. It's not to say, that it is in any way comparable to combat, but it does pose an interesting problem.
Clancy got some heat for successfully inferring classified anti-submarine warfare technology. And I'm wondering if you felt any obligation to run this by a review process.
I have a legal obligation to run it by review process.
Also, I'm wondering if we have ever targeted a non-Muslim.
Have we ever targeted a non-Muslim?
Yeah, I'm not saying they don't deserve it.
But that's
the shine on this is shocking.
That is an interesting question. That is an interesting question. Well, to answer your first question, all of my books have to go through security review. So if there's anything classified in the book, then security review screwed up. And I don't think there is anything classified in the book. Obviously, there's nothing about the American targeting rules that says you have to be a Muslim. But given where the targets have been, I suspect probably they have all been Muslim.
You can see the problem there.
Of course there's a problem there. Yeah.
Thank you. I just had a question. One of the concerns of drone warfare is obviously the blowback, potential blowback. And part of that, I feel like there's a wide variance. You never know what the child of someone who's innocent died might grow up to be. They could be a doctor, they could become a terrorist.
Right.
Given the wide variance of potential blowback in such a large spectrum, how do you analyze that problem?
I think this is why you have to be really, really careful about the collateral damage risk and err on the side of even not doing the shot if there's any risk at all of collateral damage, because you can't kill 2,500 people without creating tens of thousands of enemies. Everyone you kill, particularly innocent people, but everyone you kill has tribe. Has cousins, has uncles, has children, and in the novel this is exactly what happens. In the novel, this is not a spoiler alert. There's a strike early in the novel, and a relative of the target then becomes the protagonist that leads efforts against the drone program. And I think that's the risk that we've been running. Absolutely.
Let's try to get somebody from way in the back. In fairness.
Hi. Thank you very much for this. It's been fantastic to hear you speak. I look forward to reading your book. One of the questions I had was, it's been largely said that drone warfare only adds the desensitization of the American public to war and foreign relations and such like that. Does your book address this? And how do you think transparency and greater transparency of the program might affect this?
So I think the book addresses issues like that through the vehicle of a novel. I leave it to you to judge how much it addresses it. I think it does address it. I think the more transparency we have about all of the things we do in the war on terror and related programs, to the extent that that's out there, for one thing, it reduces the kooky right-wing or left-wing fringe that exaggerates what we are doing and makes it worse. The truth has an ability to limit the craziness. So I think that there is a real advantage to that. I think there are all sorts of advantages to transparency, particularly when we realize we're a democracy, and unless there's a very good reason, if the government is carrying out things in our name, particularly when it is carrying out a prolonged, decade-long air campaign with drones, if it's carrying that out in our name, we got to know a lot about it.
Hi, I have two comments. One, you said about accountability. Don't you think that it defeats the purpose of the program itself if you become accountable in a way? And you talk about drone killing, what about drone as a surveillance only? Would that be okay with you think?
Well, let me be clear. Using drones as a weapon is okay with me. I just am suggesting that we have to be very, very careful about it. And drones as reconnaissance devices, of course, they're great. But no, I don't think having accountability would defeat the purpose of the program. The purpose of the program is to get terrorists who we can't get in any other way. Terrorists who we know with high confidence are trying to kill Americans. And they are beyond the reach of an FBI arrest team. They are beyond the reach, reasonably, of a special forces team. We can't be dropping special forces teams all the time into combat zones. That's what the program's for. But I think when you make a mistake, to have accountability, I'm not suggesting that our pilots be court-martialed for making mistakes, any more than an F-16 pilot would be court-martialed for making mistakes. But I am suggesting that the country ought to be accountable. And when we make mistakes like blowing up a wedding, that we own up to it and that we do what is right in the custom of the country, which is to admit it, to apologize, and to pay reparations. That's the least we can do. One last question.
Right here.
We're not the only country anymore that has drones. So the question I have is, have we missed the boat entirely in shaping that dialogue internationally, since we use them as we will, and other countries are now maybe looking at that as an example?
So I am not confident of this data, but I think 3 countries have used them in lethal operations, us, Israel, and Russia. I think last count, 46 countries are operating something that qualifies as a drone. In the novel, there's a scene in Las Vegas at the drone show. So this is the reaction that people, I say, if you've been to the car show, you've been to the auto show at the convention center, have you been to the boat show? Well, in the novel, there's a drone show. And people say, oh, that's funny. You've got a really bizarre imagination. No, there is a drone show every year. There really is, in Las Vegas at the convention center. And you can walk down the aisle and see the Canadian drones and the Israeli drones and the Chinese drones and the UAE drones. I mean, everybody's making them. So yes, if you were to start all over again, you'd like to have rules of the road. you'd like to have some international understanding about what's right and what's wrong and what's acceptable use of drones and what's not. We, unfortunately, now are the last ones in the world who can do that. We would be laughed out of any room if we, the United States, came forward and said we'd like to have an international dialogue about the rules of the road with drones. I hope somebody else does. I hope somebody else does, and I'd like us to participate in that. But I suspect most of the countries in the world who would participate in that would like to rule out certain things. And frankly, I think we've probably done most of those. So it's going to be tough for us to participate in that dialogue and tough for us to agree on some international rules of the road. But when they start using them against us, we're going to wish we did. Thank you all.